The situation in Israel has been developing fast over last night and throughout this morning, as of LA time at the very least, with Benjamin Netanyahu being set to give a speech where he was going to say that he was not going to be making this major judicial reform overhaul, and then that was canceled. There was a lot of speculation as to why. And then there was talk about like, oh, maybe he's moving in the direction of stopping it. Maybe he's not. There's pressure coming at him from multiple directions. And of course, you have these major protests developing, which we're gonna talk about. As of right now, it appears that the signals they're putting out as a result of this backroom deal is that they will be temporarily, at least, stopping this incredibly controversial plan to reform the Supreme Court, as well as the interplay between the legislature and the Supreme Court in Israel. So some of what we have prepped here is no longer accurate. That is what we believe is the case. Now, I have a feeling that many of the protesters are gonna see this as a stalling tactic to see if the protests fall apart. That would be my fear. We're gonna give you more details about it. First of all, I do wanna let you know initially how this came about. So it was set off by the government's attempt to give itself greater control over the selection of Supreme Court justices and to limit the court's authority over parliament. Critics fear the changes will remove important checks and balances on the government and erode democracy. A lot of the protests are echoing those messages. Supporters say the overhaul would curb the influence of an overreaching and unelected judicial bureaucracy. And on top of the concern about what could happen with the Supreme Court, over the weekend, a defense minister was fired by Benjamin Netanyahu as well. Again, related to this. So Francesca, I'm really curious what you have to say about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's incredible when any population like rises up and can demand, take to the streets, and everyday people can join together and say that we don't believe in this power grab. We believe in a separation of the judiciary and of the executive branches and parliament. And these are important checks to have. And I think when Israel, interestingly and ironically, touts itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, that is what I think a lot of the Israelis are defending right now, is the protection of that democracy. You cannot, however, say what I just said and not think of and remember the state of occupation that Palestinians living in the West Bank, in Gaza, and within Israel itself, within the borders of the 1948 borders, what they live through and what they go through every single day, which is not democratic, which is not equal protection under the law, which is not equal rights, right? It is a steadily losing territory position where they have their human rights, their civil rights, their land grabbed from them every single day, and they are subjected to all kinds of incredible humiliation from not being able to use the same, obviously, hospitals, roads, getting a job, right? So there are so many contradictions in this, and yet I am absolutely supportive of the Israeli people standing up to a power grab from an incredibly far-right government. I just wish and hope and have faith that one day they can turn that critique also on the ways that the continuation of the occupation undermines the very democracy that they're trying to defend now.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully. And look, it's obviously beyond my anything even approaching expertise, but I would assume that to the extent that that sentiment is there, it's probably more seen in the people who are protesting literally right now. I have a feeling that if it's gonna come from anywhere, it's probably gonna come from there. And by the way, this is outdated information at this point, but at one point, at least more than 100,000 Israelis were protesting. There's been some time. We'll have to see what the beginnings of an announcement, I guess, from Benjamin Netanyahu. Maybe he will give a speech. What effect it'll have on it? Could it possibly diffuse the protests? I doubt it, I think. Perhaps if it's seen as obviously a stalling tactic, perhaps that will be a thing that will actually lead to more people getting the streets. But it has been very significant. You had everything from malls, the airport, kindergartens, the embassies as well now being shut down as a result of this. Not only from the protests and from embassy staff sort of willingly being a part of this. You had the stock exchange, it's gonna be closed until at least Tuesday. Israeli time is a big time difference, obviously. You had the head of Israelis Workers Union announcing a general strike across the country until the legislation is suspended. So we'll have to see how they respond to these developments. There hasn't been a strike like that in Israel for literally decades. One of the leaders of one of the trade union umbrella groups said, "Where are we leading our beloved Israel? To the abyss. Today we are stopping everyone's descent towards the abyss by participating in this work stoppage. There was one protester, I love this quote, who said, "This is the last chance to stop this move into a dictatorship. I'm here for the fight to the end." And apparently, while that's the initial protest that's been going on for just a little bit in response to what's going on, there are apparently right-wing WhatsApp groups and social media with activists coming together to counter protest, including calls to take up arms like tractors, guns, knives, and attack the anti-government protesters. I haven't yet seen reports of that actually happening. There'd been talk about these counter protests sort of beginning to spool up. We're gonna have to see if that happens throughout the course of today. Francesca?
Yeah, just final thoughts. I think that this is definitely a very far right government, and the protesters that are thinking of aggressing upon the people taking the streets right now are often to the even farther right of the government that's currently in power. They want more settlements. They want more ability to, basically come down on Palestinian people wherever they might be. They're more extremists, right? We saw them chanting and jeering and shouting when, like, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was bombed about a year ago, right? When there was flames emerging from that place, right? And they were shouting and cheering on the Israeli military and their incredible crimes at that moment. So I think it's important to remember, like, and this is also just a warning for all of us, in the United States, when I think a lot of Republicans here venerate Israel for a lot of different reasons, primarily because of, I think, a lot of that, the segregation, the ethnic cleansing, the let's keep the brown people over here, over there, etc. Obviously, the Christian nationalist psycho, Jesus is coming back, and then most of the Jews are going to die, and then other ones are going to convert, but shh, don't tell anybody. But then there is also that power grab, right? There is also that we like how far right this government is, and look at them making moves to even, actually consolidate their power even more so. It's hard to imagine that our country is better when it comes to separations of power in this, between the judicial and the executive branch. But imagine here if we had even more of an attempt to say, hey, let's reduce the number of Supreme Court justices to 4, right? And let's skip confirmation, right? It's just gonna be the appointment of the president, hook, line, and sinker. Well, and it effectively is,
quite a few of them recently. Now, if it's an election year, they're gonna start skipping them. So we have our own problems too.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's a good point.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.